Right, now here's a little bit of a heads up on radius arms. You might think you have a Defender completely. Now, Discovery axles actually fit on Defenders, and there are different types of thickness of radius arms. You can see this one is actually thinner than it should be. Now, this is the 300 TDI Defender bush. You can see this very clearly, the difference of the bush thickness. Now, there are different types. Be aware of this when you're working on your Defender, because you might not have what you think you have. Okay, welcome back. What we have here is the chassis supported by axle stands, and the front axle is supported by a bottle jack all on its own. This will aid moving the axle up and down as required. However, it would be wise to make sure you have axle stands under the front axle for safety purposes. Right, what we're going to do is remove the C-spanners or radius arms. You can see the track rod has been removed. This will aid ease of removing the C-spanners or radius arms. If you have a anti-roll bar, that will need to be removed. And what we're going to do first of all is to check to see if the bolts are going to move. Yeah, that's right, you have two on the axle and you have one on the chassis here. This one's a 30mm nut and the others are 22mm. Right, the reason I say try to move the bolts first, if they're seized and won't move, it's because they're seized in the sleeve in the center of the bush, which is this metal thing where my thumb is near. You might have to resort to some drastic action, possibly with a 1mm cutting blade on an angle grinder. This will cut straight through the bolts very quickly. And just for your information, no, I'm not wearing nail varnish, it's actually paint. Okay, so removing the nuts, a little bit of advice here is actually clean the thread up very, very thoroughly. So you're getting the gack, mud and rust out from the threads. And a wire brush is advisable here. I know it's like telling grandma how to suck eggs, but sometimes we forget. However, the clearer the threads are, the easier it is to wind the nut off, and because you're not using a electric gun in this position, you want to make sure your life is as easy as possible. Okay, I use 3-in-1 oil, which is a little bit thicker than WD-40, however, lubrication is advised. Okay, so look, it's not actually that tight, and it's wound off really easily. In fact, look, right at the end, usually when you find you have the hardest point, if it's rusty, it's winding off quite easily. I can even do the last bit undone with my fingers. So there you go, a bit of advice. And this bolt's the first time it's been off possibly in its life. We're also taking the panhard rod off, which is quite easy on the driver's side, or UK driver's side here. No problem, that'll come out, and you can see the bolt's quite clean. On the axle side, you're going to have to make sure the steering is in the straight ahead position so you can get the bolt out, like so. We're also going to change the bushes in this while we're here. Right, back to the radius arm. Rear end, that's a 30mm nut, and again I've cleaned the threads and lubed before removing. So that's quite easy to do. The trick here is to remove the outer bush here, which is the chassis side or the nut side. You pry it off and that will make ease of removing the radius arm rather than trying to struggle. Okay, so I'm just going to knock the bolt out here and we're free to push the radius arm off. It shouldn't just drop off, however it might do. So we use a pry bar, push it downwards, and the radius arm is off, and then just easily pull it out just like that. On the workshop bench we have two sets of radius arms or C-spanners. This set here has had the polybushes in them. These are yellow polybushes, origin unknown. You can see that they're split polybushes and they are so easy to push out, it's a joke. You can almost do it with your hand. But however, we're using a press in this video to push out and push in bushes. Alright, so the polybush is easy because there's no metal inserts that you have to remove. So it's a matter of cleaning the eyes up and also the chamfer on the eyes. This will help push the bush in much easier. And I'm doing this with a flap wheel on an electric drill. the rust has to be removed, otherwise it will be a job to push the bushes back into place. Okay, so this is in a vise, and we're going to push in the bush, which is a Bearmach bush, and that's a one-piece one. First of all, we're going to push it halfway and then fit the insert. We'll not get too deep into this, you'll see later. Right, the issue with split bushes and polybushes, well, these are different. This is the Bearmach kit, which is a solid one-piece, and the part number is BSC 286PK, which comes in a kit. Right, these also are cotton reel type. Now, this split bush, there is an issue with this, because you can see the gap there. As it wears, it may leave a ridge on the inside of the eye. This especially happens when the bushes sag or they get worn. There is a bit of controversy with polybushes. However, this set, origin unknown, and I don't know the age of it, but the bushes are square centre, so the bushes are not worn at all. Okay, now checking the radius arm eyes, where the bushes sit, you can rub your finger in there. If there is a ridge there, then you know it's worn, and the chances are, if there's severe wear, then you'll have to change the radius arm, get a second hand one. This has a ridge, a very slight one. I think we can get away with putting another bush in. Right, this is the one off the 300 TDI Defender, and these bushes are spanked. You can see that the rubber, if you look closely, is cracked and perished. You know, if you've been watching our videos, that in fact the bush moves about as the steering is turned. Okay, now if you look center, okay, the bushes are slightly angled. The rubber itself has had it. These bushes should have been changed a while ago. Right, we'll put that one back and we'll have a look at the near side one. Well, this bush is absolutely spanked, cracked rubber, and you can see the gap between the inner sleeve and the rubber itself. Okay, and it's also distorted on this end. This is the near side one. This one had the most movement in it, so that's definitely gone well past its sell by date. Okay, so grabbing radius arm on the other end. Right, so we have two bushes here. Mainly what happens is either the metal will wear, the bushes will fall to bits, but this looks like it's in fairly good condition, so we can clean this up and put some new bushes in. Not that you get too many issues with this. Basically the bushes will just perish. You don't have any metal outer or inner casing on this. It's just that corrosion needs to be cleaned off before fitting new bushes. Okay, so the original bushes without the rubber in, you can see on the outer you have a casing. Now you could use a socket which fits exactly over and doesn't bind on the hole. You could push the bush out. This you would need something like a 60 or 100 ton press to push them out. This 10 ton press wouldn't work. It started pushing it out, it came out a little bit and then it just jammed. So what we need to do is take a different approach to this. I'm not going to advise you burn out the rubber, however it is an alternative. We're going to push the rubber part out from the bush using a socket that goes through the eye. Okay, now I've done it for all four of them and they can be a little bit awkward. However, what we're doing is ripping out the rubber from the outer casing of the bush. A 10 ton press will manage this. Some people set light to these bushes and burn out the rubber, however that is messy and it leaves annoying black smoke. The older the bush, the easier it is to push the rubber out, and on the top half here you have one. You can see the rust, it hasn't been holding very well, whereas this one we had to tear out, okay, because it's still vulcanized and there's still a bit of rubber left in there, whereas this one has hardly held at all. You can see the rust there. Okay, so you're using a press. Just be aware that the sockets can go on the piss, and this is not advisable because it will burst out of the frame at some point. You should have a straight downward push which will push all the way through, like so. Our A-frame, the bolts were completely and utterly seized. Even a 3/4 inch air gun wouldn't shift them. Got goggles here. I've got an angle grinder with discs, that are 1 inch thick. Okay, now I'm just going to slice through the bolt and cut it off with an angle grinder. So what we have is the A-frame, and it's come off like so. You can see where I've cut it, and basically everything fell to bits afterwards, just with a little tap of a hammer. This bolt head is corroded in and will need to be knocked out. Otherwise it's going to be quite an easy job. Right, you can see that where it's been cut, and what we have left is the metal casing, or the sleeving, is still in the eye of the frame. With this one, it has still got the meat in it, so we're going to have to push the center out again with the press. With all these bushes, these metal elastic or original bushes, you're going to have to cut with a hacksaw, make a decent cut first of all, which is a relief cut. The aim of this is, as I say, it's a relief cut. Once it's been cut, you can then knock the casing, or the casing outer, out as easy as this. Now this is for all the bushes. I'm not going to show you how to do them all, but basically that is what you do. Make a relief cut or two, and the casing will literally just drop out. The A-frame bushes themselves have 2 inner sleeves, if you like, or 2 metal parts to it, as well as a center. So I've knocked out the thinner part, or the middle part, and then cut the next one, which is the outer casing, and then it's just literally knocked out like so. No big deal. Next thing to do is to use a higher powered drill than a battery drill. Use an electric drill on a high speed, and like this radius arm, you're cleaning the inside and the edges so you can then push the bush in easier. The A-frame, or the upper link part numbers for this, is BSC 200PK, which comes in the kit. Alright, you get grease with it, you get an inner sleeve and the outer bush. Now these are cotton reel ones, and I'm going to show you how to fit this, because this is more difficult than the radius arm bushes, which they're a doddle, to be honest with you. I'm going to show you the hard way, which doesn't work with this. First of all, the edge is greased, so we have a lubrication. This looks like graphite grease. Now putting it in the vise, as a lot of people would recommend, and basically I've got to find the right position. I've got to fully cover the end of the other side of the bush so it doesn't pop over the vise, and then wind it up. Now what happens is it will just flex everywhere until it distorts to a point where it's going to pop out like so. So this is almost impossible. Alright, now with the radius arm bushes, these are easy actually, because they are thinner cotton reel edges on them, so it just pops in. You get the right position in the vise and just wind it up and push it through. We found an alternative from the Polybush flexing all over the place. So what we're going to do, we're going to put it in the press, and we're having a hard piece on top. It's just a thick washer. Now what I'm going to use is a piston ring compressor clamp. That is going to hold the Polybush so it doesn't expand. Okay, so it's not fat. And what's happened is actually pushed the first edge of the cotton reel into the frame. Okay, and then after then, while it's halfway down, is to push the center through like so, and push the whole lot of the bush into the frame until the edge comes out the other side, and then push the center of the bush flat flush like so. Now that makes the job so much easier. You could actually do this on a vise if you have a wide enough vise. Now I'm just squaring this up a little bit more. That's done. Alright, these presses are not very expensive, and if you're going to rebuild a Land Rover, you need one. Okay, so that's job done on this one.